The rain fell like tiny stones on the metal lid of the trash barrel, creating a rhythm that had become as familiar to Maya as her own heartbeat. Her small hands, dirty and trembling from both cold and hunger, pushed deeper through the soggy cardboard and rotting vegetables. The smell made her stomach turn, but she had learned long ago to push past the disgust. Survival meant doing things that once seemed impossible. Maya was only 14, though she looked much younger. Months of living on the streets had stripped away the softness of childhood, leaving behind sharp cheekbones and eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. Her dark hair hung in tangled strings around her face, and her clothes were nothing more than layers of torn fabric she had collected from various sources. The alley behind a restaurant was her favorite hunting ground. The workers usually threw away food that was still edible, sometimes entire meals that customers had barely touched. Tonight felt different, though. The usual sounds of the busy street seemed muted, and strange tension filled the air that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She had been living like this for 8 months now. Ever since the night everything changed. The memory still hit her like a physical blow when she let her guard down. Her mother, Sarah, had been working 3 jobs just to keep their small apartment. Her father had disappeared when Maya was 7, leaving behind only empty promises and unpaid bills. Sarah had tried so hard to give Maya a normal life, working at a diner during the day, cleaning offices at night, and taking in sewing on weekends. But normal was expensive, and they were always one crisis away from disaster. When Sarah got sick and couldn't work for 2 weeks, everything fell apart like a house of cards. The landlord showed no mercy. The bills piled up like snow in winter, and within a month, they were sleeping in their car. Sarah kept promising it was temporary, that she would figure something out, but Maya could see the fear growing in her mother's eyes with each passing day. The car broke down on a Tuesday. Maya remembered because it was the day her favorite teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had asked her why she hadn't been to school in weeks. Maya had lied, saying her family was moving, because the truth was too complicated and too shameful to explain. That night, they slept in a park, using newspapers as blankets and sharing a single hamburger they had bought with the last of their money. Sarah tried to hide how sick she was getting, but Maya wasn't stupid. Her mother's cough had turned into something deeper and more frightening, and she was losing weight she couldn't afford to lose. When Sarah finally collapsed outside a convenience store, the paramedics who came said she needed to go to the hospital immediately. Maya wanted to go with her, but the social workers had different plans. "Don't worry, sweetie," Sarah had whispered from the stretcher, her voice barely audible. "I'll come find you. No matter where they put you, I'll come find you." Those were the last words Maya heard from her mother. 3 days later, she learned that Sarah had died from pneumonia, her body too weak to fight anymore. The foster home they placed Maya in was clean, and the family seemed nice enough, but it felt like living with strangers who were being paid to care about her. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson treated her well, but Maya could see the calculations in their eyes, the way they discussed her like she was a temporary project. Their own children, twin boys who were a year younger than Maya, made it clear that she didn't belong there. "You're not really our sister," one of them had said during dinner one night. "You're just staying here until they find somewhere else to put you." The words stung because they were true. Maya was a visitor in their lives, and everyone knew it. The breaking point came 3 months later when she overheard Mrs. Henderson on the phone with the social worker. "She's a good kid, but she's not adjusting well," Mrs. Henderson was saying. "She barely talks to us, and I think she might be better suited for a different type of placement. Maybe somewhere with other kids who understand what she's been through." Maya knew what that meant. They were going to send her away again, probably to a group home where she would be just another case file in an overworked system. That night, she packed the few belongings that were truly hers into a backpack and slipped out through the window. If she was going to be unwanted, at least she could choose how to handle it. Living on the streets was nothing like what she had seen in movies. It wasn't romantic or adventurous. It was terrifying and exhausting and lonely in ways she hadn't known were possible. The first week, she barely ate anything, too scared to approach people and too proud to beg. She learned quickly that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The other homeless people she met were a mix of broken souls and hardened survivors. Some tried to help her, sharing information about where to find food or safe places to sleep. Others saw her as competition for limited resources, or worse, as something to take advantage of. Maya learned to be invisible, to move through the city like a ghost, taking only what she needed and never staying in one place too long. She had figured out which restaurants threw away the best food and when. Tuesday nights at the Italian place usually meant pasta that had been made fresh, but not ordered. Thursday mornings at the breakfast diner often yielded entire meals that had been sent back for minor complaints. The trick was timing and stealth. Get there too early, and the food wouldn't be thrown out yet. Too late, and either the garbage trucks would have come or someone else would have gotten there first. Tonight was Thursday, which should have meant good pickings from the diner, but as Maya dug through the barrel, she found mostly coffee grounds and soggy napkins. Her stomach cramped with hunger as she realized this search was going to come up empty. She had eaten only a stale donut yesterday, and nothing the day before that. Her body was starting to feel weak in a way that scared her. The sound of footsteps in the alley made her freeze. Heavy boots on wet pavement, moving with purpose rather than a random shuffle of someone just passing through. Maya's survival instincts kicked in immediately. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows beside the dumpster, making herself as small as possible. The footsteps stopped directly behind her. Maya's heart hammered so hard she was sure whoever it was could hear it. She had learned that there were predators who looked for vulnerable kids like her, people who saw easy targets in the desperate and the invisible. She had been lucky so far, but luck always ran out eventually. "I can see you there," a voice said quietly. It was deep and rough, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had seen too much of the world's darkness. "You don't have to hide." Maya remained perfectly still, hoping whoever it was would lose interest and move on. Sometimes if you were quiet and small enough, people would convince themselves they were seeing things. "Listen, kid," the voice continued, gentler now but still commanding. "I'm not here to hurt you, but you're not safe in this alley, especially not tonight. There are people coming who won't be as understanding as I am." Something in his tone made Maya risk a glance over her shoulder. The man standing behind her was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark skin and graying hair cut very short. He wore military fatigues and combat boots, and there was something about the way he carried himself that spoke of authority and discipline. But his eyes, when they met hers, weren't cruel or threatening. They held a mixture of concern and understanding that she hadn't seen in a long time. "My name is Marcus," he said, crouching down so he was closer to her level. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I also know what it looks like when someone is out of options. How long since you've had a real meal?" Maya's stomach chose that moment to growl loudly, betraying her. She felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but Marcus didn't laugh or make her feel worse about it. "That's what I thought," he said. "Look, I can't make your problems disappear, but I can offer you something better than digging through garbage. The question is whether you're willing to take a chance on something different." Maya studied his face, tried to read his intentions. In her months on the street, she had gotten good at recognizing the different types of people she encountered. There were the ones who wanted to use her, the ones who wanted to save her for their own sense of righteousness, the ones who wanted to pretend she didn't exist, and the very rare ones who simply wanted to help without expecting anything in return. Marcus felt different from all of those categories. "What kind of chance?" she asked, her voice hoarse from lack of use. "There's a place," Marcus said carefully. "It's not a traditional shelter or group home. It's for kids who have fallen through the cracks of the system, kids who need something different than what's usually offered. It's not easy, and it's not for everyone, but it's safe, and there's always food, and no one there will hurt you or make you feel like you don't belong." Maya wanted to believe him, but hope was dangerous. It made you vulnerable and set you up for disappointment that could break whatever was left of your spirit. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Maya could see something painful cross his features. "Because 20 years ago, I was a kid looking through garbage cans for food, and nobody stopped to offer me anything better. I told myself if I ever got the chance to be the person I needed back then, I would take it." The honesty in his voice was what convinced her. It wasn't polished or rehearsed like the things social workers and foster parents said. It was raw and real and came from a place she recognized. "The people you mentioned," Maya said. "The ones who are coming." "What did you mean?" Marcus glanced toward the mouth of the alley, and Maya saw his jaw tighten. "There's been a sweep planned for this area. Police, social services, some other groups that aren't as official, but are just as determined to clear out the homeless population. They'll be here within the hour, and kids like you, let's just say you don't want to get caught up in that. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. She had heard whispers about sweeps from other street kids, stories about people disappearing or ending up in places that were worse than living on the streets. "So what do you suggest?" she asked. Marcus stood up and extended his hand toward her. "Come with me. Right now. No questions asked until we're somewhere safe, and then I'll explain everything. But we need to move quickly." Maya looked at his outstretched hand, knowing that taking it would change everything. She could stay here and take her chances with whatever was coming, or she could trust this stranger who claimed to understand what she was going through. Neither option felt particularly safe, but one of them offered the possibility of something better. The sound of vehicles entering the far end of the alley made the decision for her. Maya grabbed Marcus's hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs were shaky from hunger and cold, but adrenaline helped her keep moving as he led her quickly toward the opposite end of the alley. "Stay close to me and don't look back," Marcus said quietly. "Whatever happens next, just remember that you're stronger than you think you are. You've survived this long on your own, which means you have something special inside you. Tonight, we're going to figure out what that something is." As they slipped out of the alley and into the maze of city streets, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months. The possibility that tomorrow might be different from today. She didn't know where Marcus was taking her or what this mysterious place was that he had mentioned, but for the first time since her mother died, she felt like maybe she wasn't completely alone in the world. The rain continued to fall as they walked through the shadows, but Maya barely noticed it anymore. She was focused on putting one foot in front of the other and following the steady, confident pace of the man who had appeared in her darkest moment like some kind of guardian angel. Whatever came next, it had to be better than the life she was leaving behind in that alley. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the beginning of something she had stopped believing in, a chance at a real future. Marcus led Maya through a series of winding streets and back alleys that she had never seen before, despite spending months exploring every corner of the city. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew these paths intimately, checking over his shoulder occasionally, but never seeming worried or hurried. Maya found herself trusting his calm certainty, even though every survival instinct she had developed told her to be suspicious. They walked for what felt like hours, though Maya's exhausted state made it difficult to judge time accurately. Her stomach had stopped cramping from hunger and had moved into a hollow, floating sensation that made her feel disconnected from her own body. She concentrated on matching Marcus's steady pace and tried not to think about how much her feet hurt in the worn-out shoes she had been wearing for weeks. "Almost there," Marcus said quietly when Maya stumbled slightly. "I know you're tired, but we need to keep moving for just a little longer." The neighborhood they were entering looked different from the commercial district where Maya had been living. The buildings were older but better maintained, and there were actual trees lining some of the streets. It felt more residential, more like the kind of place where families might live normal lives. Maya felt a pang of something that might have been homesickness, though she wasn't sure what exactly she was missing. Marcus stopped in front of a large, stone building that looked like it might have been a school or church at some point in the past. It was 3 stories tall with tall windows and solid walls that suggested it had been built to last. There were lights on in several of the windows, and Maya could see movement inside, shadows of people going about their evening activities. "This is it," Marcus said, pulling out a set of keys. "I need to prepare you for what you're about to see. This place is different from anywhere you've probably been before. The people here have all been where you are now, and they've all had to make the same choice you're making tonight." Maya looked up at the building, trying to imagine what lay beyond those doors. "What kind of place is it exactly?" "Officially, it's called the Sanctuary," Marcus explained as he unlocked the heavy front door. "It's a residential program for young people who have aged out of traditional foster care or who haven't been served well by the conventional system. But really, it's a place where kids who have learned to survive on their own can figure out how to start living instead." The door opened into a large entrance hall with high ceilings and warm lighting. The floors were polished wood, and Maya could smell something cooking that made her stomach clench with renewed hunger. The walls were covered with artwork that looked like it had been created by young people, paintings and drawings that showed both struggle and hope in bold colors and honest lines. "Maya," Marcus said, his voice taking on a more formal tone, "before we go any further, I need you to understand something important. What happens here, who you meet, What you learn about this place and the people in it, all of that stays here. We exist because we're careful about who we trust and how we protect each other. Can you agree to that? Maya nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was agreeing to. The building felt safe in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time, and she was willing to follow whatever rules would let her stay in that feeling for a while. Marcus led her through the entrance hall and into a large living area where several young people were gathered around couches and chairs, some reading, others engaged in quiet conversations. They all looked to be teenagers or young adults, and Maya immediately noticed that they all had the same quality she recognized in herself: the alertness of people who had learned to be constantly aware of their surroundings. Everyone, Marcus said, not raising his voice, but somehow commanding attention from everyone in the room. This is Maya. She'll be staying with us for a while. The responses weren't what Maya had expected. There were no forced smiles or overly enthusiastic greetings like she had experienced in the foster home. Instead, the young people acknowledged her with nods and quiet hellos that felt genuine rather than performative. A few went back to what they had been doing, while others watched her with the kind of curiosity that came from shared experience rather than judgment. A girl who looked to be about Maya's age approached them. She had short red hair and freckles across her nose, and she moved with the kind of confidence that Maya envied. "I'm Casey," she said, extending her hand to Maya. "Marcus probably told you some official version of what this place is, but if you want the real story, I can fill you in later." Marcus smiled at Casey's comment. Casey has been here for 2 years. She's what we call a senior resident, which means she helps new people get oriented. "Casey, would you mind showing Maya around and getting her settled in?" "Of course," Casey said, then turned to Maya. "Are you hungry? Because dinner was about an hour ago, but I saved some just in case Marcus brought someone new home tonight." The word home hit Maya in a way she hadn't expected. It had been so long since anyone had used that word in reference to a place she was allowed to be that she had almost forgotten what it meant. Casey led Maya toward what turned out to be a large, well-equipped kitchen where several people were cleaning up after the evening meal. The smells of garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread filled the air, and Maya's stomach responded so loudly that Casey laughed. "Yeah, I remember that feeling," Casey said, pulling a covered plate from the refrigerator. "When I first got here, I ate everything they put in front of me because I couldn't believe it was real. It took me weeks to stop hoarding food in my room." While Casey heated up the plate of food, Maya looked around the kitchen. It was clearly designed for feeding a lot of people, with multiple stoves and a large island in the center, but it felt warm and homey rather than institutional. There were pictures taped to the refrigerator, lists of chores and schedules, and the kind of casual clutter that accumulated when people actually live somewhere rather than just staying there temporarily. "So," Casey said, setting a plate of spaghetti and meatballs in front of Maya along with a glass of milk, "Marcus probably made this place sound all mysterious and special, right? He does that with everyone. He likes to build up the drama." Maya took a bite of the food and had to stop herself from eating too quickly. It was the most delicious thing she had tasted in months, and she wanted to make it last as long as possible while also wanting to devour it all immediately. "Is it not special?" Maya asked between bites. "Oh, it's definitely special," Casey said, settling into the chair across from her. "But it's also just a place where kids like us live and go to school and figure out how to be normal people. The special part isn't the building or the program or any of that stuff. The special part is that everyone here understands what it's like to have everything fall apart and to have to put yourself back together." Maya continued eating while Casey talked, grateful to have something to do with her hands while she processed all the new information. The food was helping her think more clearly, and she was starting to notice details about her surroundings that her hunger had made her miss earlier. "How many people live here?" Maya asked. "Right now, about 25, Casey said, ages 14 to 21. Most people stay for 2 to 3 years, long enough to finish high school and figure out what they want to do next. Some stay longer if they need more time, and some leave sooner if they're ready. It's pretty flexible. And Marcus runs the whole thing?" Casey smiled at that. "Marcus likes to think he runs things, but really this place runs itself. He founded it about 10 years ago after he got out of the military, but the residents do most of the day-to-day stuff. We have house meetings every week where we make decisions about rules and budgets and who does what chores. Marcus is more like, I don't know, a safety net. He's there if we need him, but mostly he lets us figure things out on our own. Maya finished her dinner and sat back in her chair, feeling more human than she had in weeks. The combination of warm food and safe shelter was making her realize just how exhausted she really was, but she wanted to understand more about where she had landed. "What's the catch?" she asked. "Places like this don't exist without some kind of catch." Casey looked at her with respect rather than surprise at the question. "The catch is that it's not easy. You can't just live here and do whatever you want. Everyone has to go to school or have a job. Everyone has to contribute to keeping the house running. And everyone has to participate in group meetings and one-on-one counseling sessions. Some people can't handle that much structure after living on their own. And if you break the rules, depends on what you break and why," Casey said. "The only thing that will get you kicked out immediately is violence or bringing drugs into the house. Everything else, we try to work through as a community. The idea is that this is your home, and you don't get kicked out of your home for making mistakes." Maya was quiet for a moment, trying to wrap her mind around the concept of a place that offered stability without threatening to take it away at the first sign of trouble. "Why did Marcus pick me?" she asked finally. "I mean, there have to be lots of kids out there who need help." Casey's expression became more serious. "Marcus doesn't really pick people randomly. He has a network of contacts throughout the city. Social workers, police officers, teachers, people who work with homeless populations. They let him know when they encounter kids who might be good candidates for this place. But ultimately, Marcus has a pretty good instinct for recognizing kids who are ready to try something different." "How do you know if you're ready?" "You don't," Casey said simply. "You just decide to take the chance and see what happens. That's what I did anyway." Maya was about to ask more questions when Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Casey, do you mind if I borrow Maya for a few minutes? I'd like to show her where she'll be sleeping and go over some of the basic house information." Casey stood up and started clearing Maya's dishes. "Of course. Maya, I'll be in the common room watching TV if you want to hang out later. There's usually a group of us that stays up pretty late on weekends." Marcus led Maya up a staircase to the second floor, which was lined with doors that Maya assumed led to bedrooms. The hallway was carpeted and well lit, with more artwork on the walls and small bulletin boards outside each door covered with photos and personal items. "Each resident has their own room," Marcus explained as they walked. "It's not huge, but it's private, and you can decorate it however you want. You'll be sharing a bathroom with 3 other girls, but everyone's pretty good about keeping things clean and respecting each other's space." He stopped in front of a door that had a small nameplate that said Maya in neat handwriting. Maya stared at the nameplate, confused. "How did you—" "Casey made it while you were eating dinner," Marcus said, opening the door. "She does that for everyone. Says it helps new residents feel like they belong here from the first night." The room was small, but comfortable, with a single bed, a desk, a dresser, and a large window that looked out over what appeared to be a small garden. The walls were painted a soft blue, and there were clean sheets on the bed along with a thick comforter and several pillows. Maya sat down on the edge of the bed, and it was so much softer than anything she had slept on in months that she had to resist the urge to lie down immediately. "Maya," Marcus said, sitting in the chair at the desk, "I want to be completely honest with you about what this place is and what we expect from residents. This isn't a temporary shelter or emergency placement. We're hoping that people who come here will stay long enough to finish their education and develop the skills they need to build independent, successful lives." Maya nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what successful meant in this context. "That means," Marcus continued, "that there are rules and expectations. You'll need to attend school every day. You'll have chores and responsibilities around the house. You'll participate in weekly group meetings and see a counselor individually once a week. And most importantly, you'll need to be willing to work on yourself and your relationships with other people." "What if I can't do all that?" Maya asked. "Then we'll figure out what kind of support you need to be able to do it," Marcus said. "The point isn't to set you up to fail. The point is to give you the structure and resources you need to succeed. But you have to want it, Maya. We can't want it for you." Maya looked around the room that was apparently hers now, trying to imagine filling the dresser with clothes and putting personal items on the desk and sleeping in that bed every night. It seemed too good to be true, but everything about this place had seemed too good to be true since the moment Marcus had found her in that alley. "How long do I have to decide?" she asked. "You don't have to decide anything tonight, except whether you want to sleep here instead of on the street," Marcus said. "Everything else we can figure out day by day. But, Maya, I need you to know that this opportunity doesn't come around very often. I don't say that to pressure you, but because I want you to understand how much potential I see in you." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, and she blinked them back quickly. She had trained herself not to cry, because tears were a luxury that could be dangerous when you were trying to survive on your own. "Why me?" she asked again. "There's so many other kids out there." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could see that he was choosing his words carefully. Because, he said finally, "When I watched you in that alley tonight, I saw someone who had learned how to survive without losing her humanity. That's rarer than you might think. A lot of kids in your situation become angry or bitter or give up hope entirely. But you were still fighting, still trying to take care of yourself, still looking for solutions instead of just accepting defeat. That tells me you have something inside you that can't be broken." Maya felt something crack open inside her chest, some wall she had built to protect herself from disappointment and loss. The feeling was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow you sleep late if you want to, because it's Saturday. When you're ready, Casey or one of the other residents will give you a tour of the whole building and introduce you to everyone. We'll get you some new clothes and basic supplies. And sometime this weekend, you and I will sit down and talk about what your goals are and how we can help you achieve them." Marcus stood up and moved toward the door. "There are clean towels in the bathroom, and you'll find some basic toiletries and pajamas in the top drawer of the dresser. If you need anything during the night, my room is at the end of the hall, and I'm a light sleeper." After he left, Maya sat on the bed for a long time, looking around the room and trying to convince herself that this was really happening. She had been living day to day for so long that it was hard to imagine planning for tomorrow, let alone thinking about goals and futures. Eventually, she got up and looked in the dresser drawer that Marcus had mentioned. There were indeed pajamas there, soft and clean and in approximately her size, along with a toothbrush still in its package, and travel-sized containers of shampoo and soap. Maya took a long, hot shower, the first she had enjoyed in more than a month. She washed her hair twice and stood under the spray until the water started to cool down. When she finally emerged, she felt like she was washing away more than just dirt and grime. She was washing away the desperation and fear that had become so much a part of her daily existence that she had stopped noticing them. Wearing the clean pajamas and lying in the soft bed, Maya stared up at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened in the space of a few hours. This morning she had been a homeless kid digging through garbage, and now she was lying in her own bed in what Marcus called a sanctuary. The word kept echoing in her mind as she drifted off to sleep. Sanctuary, a place of safety and protection, a place where someone like her could stop running and start building something real. For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to believe that maybe her story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Maya woke up to sunlight streaming through clean windows and the sound of voices and laughter coming from somewhere downstairs. For a moment, she lay still, tried to remember where she was and why she felt so rested. The bed was soft, the room was warm, and for the first time in months, she had slept through the entire night without waking up to check for danger. The events of the previous evening came back to her gradually, like pieces of a dream that might or might not be real. Marcus finding her in the alley, the walk through the city, this building that Casey had called home, the room with her name on the door. Maya sat up and looked around, half expecting to find herself back on the street, but everything was exactly as she remembered it. She got dressed in the same clothes she had been wearing, since they were the only ones she owned, and made her way downstairs following the sound of voices. The kitchen was bustling with activity as several residents prepared what looked like an elaborate breakfast. Casey was at the stove flipping pancakes, while a boy who looked to be about 17 was scrambling eggs in a large pan. "Maya," Casey called out when she spotted her. Perfect timing. Saturday breakfast is kind of a big deal around here. Everyone contributes something, and we eat together before we start weekend activities. Maya stood in the doorway feeling uncertain about whether she was supposed to join in or wait to be invited. The boy at the stove looked over and smiled at her. "I'm David," he said. "Casey told me you arrived last night. Welcome to the chaos." He gestured around the kitchen where at least 6 people were working on different parts of the meal. "Don't worry, it looks more complicated than it is. Casey, can you get Maya set up with something to do?" Absolutely, Casey said, handing Maya a knife and pointing to a cutting board covered with fruit. Think you can handle chopping strawberries? We're making a fruit salad to go with everything else. Maya took the knife gratefully, happy to have a specific task that would let her contribute without having to figure out the social dynamics of the group. As she worked, she listened to the easy conversation flowing around her. These young people talked to each other like family, teasing and joking and coordinating their efforts with the kind of shorthand that came from living together for a long time. So Maya, David said as he transferred the scrambled eggs to a large serving bowl. Casey says you're from the city originally. What part? Maya hesitated, not sure how much of her story she was ready to share. The east side mostly, she said finally, near the industrial area. I know that neighborhood, said a girl who was setting the table in the adjoining dining room. I'm Zara, by the way. I grew up about 10 blocks from there before I ended up in foster care. There was something matter-of-fact about the way Zara mentioned foster care, like it was just another piece of information rather than something shameful or painful to discuss. Maya had spent months feeling like her circumstances made her different from normal people, but here it seemed like having a complicated background was just part of everyone's story. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying what appeared to be a large pot of coffee. Good morning, Maya. How did you sleep? Really well, Maya said, and she was surprised to realize it was completely true. Thank you for the room. And the clothes. She gestured to the clean pajamas she had found in the dresser. Those were donated by a local church group, Marcus explained. We get a lot of support from the community, which helps us provide things for new residents. Speaking of which, after breakfast, Casey is going to take you shopping for some basic supplies. Maya felt a familiar anxiety rise in her chest. I don't have any money, she said quietly. We have a fund for new residents, Casey said without missing a beat. Everyone who lives here contributes a little bit each month, and we use it to help new people get started. When you're working and earning money, you'll contribute too, and we'll help the next person who shows up. The concept of people helping each other in such a systematic way was foreign to Maya, who had learned to think of charity as something that came with strings attached or made you obligated to people who might use that obligation against you later. What kind of work? Maya asked. Depends on what you're interested in and what you're good at, David said. I work at a bike shop downtown 3 days a week and go to classes at the community college the other 2 days. Zara babysits for several families in the neighborhood and takes online high school classes. Casey works at the library and is finishing up her GED. Everyone does something different, Casey added, but everyone does something. That's one of the basic rules. Marcus believes that having a purpose and contributing to your own support is important for building confidence and self-reliance. Maya nodded, though the idea of planning for a job and classes felt overwhelming. She had been focused on survival for so long that thinking about normal teenage activities like school and work seemed almost impossible. The breakfast was unlike anything Maya had experienced in her limited exposure to group living situations. Instead of people grabbing food and eating quickly before going their separate ways, everyone sat around a large dining table and engaged in actual conversation. They talked about their plans for the weekend, shared news about their jobs and classes, and discussed house business like who was responsible for what chores and when they needed to schedule the next house meeting. Maya mostly listened, fascinated by the way these young people operated like a functional family unit. There were disagreements and negotiations, but they were handled with respect and humor rather than anger or manipulation. When David mentioned that he was struggling with a math class at the community college, 3 people immediately offered to help him study. When Zara said she was worried about finding time to finish a history project, Casey suggested a study group that could work together on their respective assignments. After breakfast, several residents headed out for various weekend activities, while others settled into cleaning up the kitchen and common areas. Casey handed Maya a list written on notebook paper. Basic survival kit, Casey explained. Clothes, toiletries, school supplies, a few personal items to make your room feel more like yours. The budget is about $200, which should cover everything you need to get started. Later, when you're earning money, you can add to your wardrobe and buy things you want rather than just things you need. Maya looked at the list, which included items like 3 pairs of jeans, 5 shirts, underwear and socks, winter coat, backpack, notebooks, and pens, something for your wall. The last item made her smile slightly. Someone had thought about the fact that a teenage girl might want to personalize her space with posters or pictures or whatever made her feel at home. Ready. Casey asked, grabbing a jacket from a hook by the kitchen door. We'll take the bus downtown. There's a thrift store that has really good quality stuff for reasonable prices, and then we can hit the drugstore and office supply place for everything else. As they walked to the bus stop, Maya found herself looking around the neighborhood with new eyes. Yesterday, she had been focused on following Marcus through unfamiliar streets, but today she was seeing the area as a place where she might actually live. The houses were small, but well-maintained, with front yards and trees and the kind of details that suggested people cared about where they lived. Casey, Maya said as they waited for the bus. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you end up here? I mean, what was your situation before? Casey was quiet for a moment, and Maya worried that she had asked something too personal. But when Casey spoke, her voice was matter-of-fact rather than upset. My parents were both addicted to drugs, Casey said. I spent most of my childhood taking care of my younger brother and trying to keep us both safe. When I was 13, our neighbor called social services because she hadn't seen my parents in 3 days and she could hear my brother crying. They put us in foster care, but they couldn't place us together, so I never saw him again. Maya felt her chest tighten with sympathy and recognition. I'm sorry. The foster families I lived with weren't bad people, but none of them understood what I had been through or what I needed. They wanted me to be grateful and normal and to forget about my past and focus on my future. But you can't just forget about things like that, you know? They become part of who you are. Maya nodded, understanding exactly what Casey meant. How did Marcus find you? I was sleeping in a park near the library where I spent most of my days, Casey said. I had aged out of foster care at 18 and had nowhere to go. One of the librarians who knew me contacted Marcus and told him about my situation. He came and found me and offered me a place here. Were you scared to trust him? Casey laughed, terrified. I had learned not to trust anyone who offered help, because help always came with conditions that weren't explained up front. But I was also tired of being cold and hungry and alone, so I figured it was worth the risk. The bus arrived, and they found seats near the back. Maya watched the city go by outside the window, seeing familiar streets from a completely different perspective. Less than 24 hours ago, these had been streets she navigated looking for food and shelter and safety. Now, they were just a route between her new home and the places where she would buy things for her new life. The thrift store was overwhelming at first, with racks and racks of clothes in all sizes and styles. Casey was an efficient and practical shopper, helping Maya find jeans that fit well and shirts that were in good condition and would work for both school and casual wear. They found a warm winter coat that looked almost new, and Casey insisted on adding a dress to their pile for special occasions or if you want to feel fancy. The thing about building a wardrobe when you're starting from nothing, Casey explained as they sorted through a bin of socks and underwear, is to focus on basics that can work in multiple situations. You can always add more interesting pieces later, but first you need the foundation. Maya tried on everything to make sure it fit, and for the first time in months, she looked at herself in a mirror with something other than despair. The clean, well-fitting clothes made her look like a normal teenager rather than a homeless kid. Her hair was still too long and shapeless, but Casey had mentioned that one of the residents cut hair and might be willing to help her with a new style. At the drugstore, they bought shampoo and soap and toothpaste and all the small necessities that Maya had been doing without or improvising for months. Casey added items to their cart that Maya wouldn't have thought of, like nail clippers and hair elastics and Band-Aids, the kind of things that people with stable lives took for granted. The office supply store was last, where they bought notebooks and pens and a sturdy backpack that would work for school. Casey also insisted on a small bulletin board and pushpin so Maya could display photos or artwork in her room. I don't have any photos, Maya said. You will, Casey said confidently. Life here tends to generate a lot of good memories that you'll want to keep. On the bus ride back to the sanctuary, Maya felt a strange mixture of excitement and anxiety about her bags full of new belongings. She had gone from owning essentially nothing to having everything she needed for a normal life, and the transition felt almost too fast a process. Casey, she said as they got off the bus, what if I can't do this? What if I'm too messed up to live like a normal person? Casey stopped walking and turned to face her. Maya, can I tell you something that Marcus told me when I first got here? Maya nodded. He said that normal is just a word people use to describe whatever they're used to. The kids who live at the sanctuary aren't normal by most people's standards, because we've all been through things that most people never experience. But we're normal for each other because we understand what it takes to rebuild your life from nothing. They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, Maya carrying her bags of new belongings and trying to imagine what her life might look like a month or a year from now. For so long, her entire focus had been on surviving each day, but now she was being asked to think about goals and plans and the kind of person she wanted to become. When they got back to the sanctuary, Maya spent the afternoon organizing her new belongings and setting up her room. She hung her clothes in the small closet, arranged her toiletries in the bathroom she shared with 3 other girls, and put her school supplies on the desk. Casey had bought her a small lamp for the desk, and the warm light made the space feel more personal and cozy. That evening, there was what Marcus called a house meeting where all the residents gathered in the large living room to discuss upcoming events and address any issues that needed group attention. Maya sat next to Casey and mostly listened, amazed by how these young people managed their shared living situation with such maturity and cooperation. They talked about scheduling deep cleaning for the common areas, coordinating transportation for people who had jobs or classes in different parts of the city, and planning a group outing to see a movie the following weekend. When Marcus asked if there was any new business to discuss, David raised his hand. "I'd like to propose that we welcome Maya officially as a new resident," David said. "She's been here 2 days, she's participating in house activities, and I think she should be included in house decisions going forward." There was a murmur of agreement from around the room, and several people turned to smile at Maya. Marcus looked at Maya directly. "Maya, are you ready to commit to being a resident here rather than just a visitor?" Maya felt everyone's attention focused on her, and for a moment she was overwhelmed by the weight of the decision. Saying yes would mean accepting help and support, but it would also mean taking on responsibilities and expectations. It would mean believing that she deserved a chance at a normal life. "Yes," she said, and her voice was stronger than she had expected it to be. "I want to stay." The response was immediate and warm, with applause and congratulations from around the room. Casey squeezed her hand, and Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since her mother died, the feeling of belonging somewhere. As the meeting continued with discussions about school enrollment and job possibilities for Maya, she looked around the room at the faces of the young people who had become her new family. They were all different ages and backgrounds and had come from different types of difficult circumstances, but they shared something essential: the determination to build better lives for themselves and the willingness to support each other in that process. For the first time since that terrible night when she had left the foster home, Maya allowed herself to believe that her future might hold something more than just survival. She was ready to find out what kind of person she could become when she wasn't spending all her energy on simply staying alive. 3 months into her new life at the sanctuary, Maya was beginning to understand what people meant when they talked about routine. She woke up at 6:30 every morning, showered, and dressed for school, ate breakfast with whoever else was up early, and caught the bus downtown to Jefferson High School, where she was enrolled as a sophomore. After school, she came home to the sanctuary, did her homework in her room or the common study area, helped with dinner preparation or cleanup, and spent her evenings reading or watching TV with the other residents. It should have felt normal by now, but Maya still woke up most mornings with a moment of confusion about where she was and whether this stable life was really hers. The feeling usually passed quickly, replaced by the busy rhythm of the day, but it served as a constant reminder that she was still learning how to trust that good things could last. School had been the biggest challenge. Maya had always been a good student before her life fell apart, but the months on the street had left gaps in her education that made it difficult to keep up with her classmates. More than that, she struggled with the social aspects of school. The other students seemed so young to her, worried about things like homework deadlines and weekend parties and who was dating whom. Maya found it hard to relate to problems that felt so small compared to what she had been through. Her English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been the first person to really connect with her. When Maya had turned in her first essay, a carefully crafted piece about overcoming challenges that revealed nothing real about her life, Mrs. Rodriguez had asked her to stay after class. "This is well written," Mrs. Rodriguez had said, holding up Maya's paper, "but it doesn't sound like you. I can tell you're a thoughtful person with real experiences to draw from. I'd like to see you write something that comes from your actual perspective rather than what you think I want to hear. Maya had been defensive at first, insisting that she had written what was assigned, but Mrs. Rodriguez had been gently persistent. Maya, I've been teaching for 15 years. I can usually tell when a student is hiding something important about themselves. You don't have to share your whole story with the class, but I think your writing would be stronger if you weren't working so hard to keep yourself out of it. That conversation had led to Maya writing a piece about the experience of starting over in a new place, which had led to more honest writing, which had led to her slowly beginning to find her voice not just on paper, but in class discussions and eventually in conversations with other students. The breakthrough had come during a unit on social justice literature. The class was reading books about young people overcoming difficult circumstances, and Maya found herself getting frustrated with what she saw as sanitized versions of real struggles. These books make it seem like having a hard life automatically makes you wise and strong, Maya had said during a class discussion about The Outsiders. But that's not how it works in real life. Sometimes having a hard life just makes you scared and angry and broken. The classroom had gotten very quiet, and Maya had immediately regretted speaking up. But Mrs. Rodriguez had encouraged her to continue. Can you explain what you mean by that, Maya? I mean that when you're actually living through really difficult things, you don't feel noble or inspirational. You feel desperate and alone and like you're failing at everything. And the adults who are supposed to help you usually just make you feel like your problems are your fault. The discussion that followed had been unlike anything Maya had experienced in school before. Other students had started sharing their own experiences with difficulty and loss, and Maya had realized that even people who seemed to have perfect lives had struggled with things like divorce and depression and family addiction. She wasn't as alone as she had thought. Mrs. Rodriguez had approached her after class again. Maya, have you ever thought about joining the school newspaper? We need writers who can bring a real perspective to the issues that affect young people. Maya had been skeptical at first. The school newspaper seemed like something for the popular kids who wanted to add activities to their college applications. But Mrs. Rodriguez had introduced her to Jake, the editor, who turned out to be a quiet senior who wrote articles about things like homelessness and mental health and the challenges facing students who are aging out of foster care. We don't write about prom themes and sports scores, Jake had explained during Maya's first newspaper meeting. We write about things that actually matter to students who are dealing with real problems. Would you be interested in writing about the experience of changing schools mid-year, or what it's like to live in a residential program? Maya had been terrified of revealing so much about herself, but she had also been intrigued by the idea of turning her experiences into something that might help other people understand what kids like her went through. Her first article, about the challenges of building trust after experiencing instability, had been published in the school paper and had generated more response than she had expected. Students she had never spoken to before had approached her to say that the article had helped them understand their own experiences or the experiences of friends or family members. A few had shared their own stories of living in foster care or group homes or with relatives after their parents couldn't care for them. Maya had started to realize that her story wasn't as unusual as she had thought. The success with the newspaper had led to other opportunities. Maya had been invited to join the peer counseling program, where students were trained to provide support and resources to other students who were struggling with various challenges. She had been asked to speak to groups of social work students at the local college about the perspective of young people in residential programs. And she had started thinking seriously about what she wanted to do after high school. But just as Maya was beginning to feel confident about her place in the world, something happened that threatened to undo all the progress she had made. It started on a Tuesday afternoon when Maya came home from school to find Marcus sitting in the kitchen with a woman she had never seen before. The woman was older, maybe in her 50s, with gray hair and a professional-looking suit. She had a briefcase and a folder full of papers, and she looked at Maya with the kind of expression that usually meant bad news. Maya, Marcus said, his voice more formal than usual, "This is Sandra Mitchell from the State Department of Children and Family Services. She needs to speak with you about your living situation here at the sanctuary." Maya felt her stomach drop. She had learned to recognize the look of social workers and case managers, and she knew that visits from state agencies usually meant that someone was questioning whether her current placement was appropriate or legal or in her best interests. "Have I done something wrong?" Maya asked, settling into a chair across from the woman, but keeping her muscles tensed in case she needed to run. "Not at all, MS." Mitchell said, opening her folder. This is just a routine review. When young people are placed in non-traditional residential programs, we're required to check in periodically to make sure that their needs are being met and that they're making appropriate progress toward independent living. Maya looked at Marcus, who gave her a reassuring nod, but couldn't hide the tension in his own expression. Maya, Ms. Mitchell continued, I need to ask you some questions about your experience here. Please understand that I'm not trying to trick you or get you in trouble. I just need to understand what your life is like and whether this placement is serving your best interests. For the next hour, Maya answered questions about her daily routine, her relationships with other residents, her schooling, her plans for the future, and her overall satisfaction with living at the sanctuary. Most of the questions were straightforward, but some felt like traps designed to reveal problems or dissatisfaction that could be used to justify moving her somewhere else. Maya, Ms. Mitchell said near the end of the interview, I need you to be honest with me. Have you ever felt unsafe here? Has anyone ever pressured you to do things you didn't want to do? Do you feel like you have the freedom to make your own decisions about your life? Maya looked at Marcus again, seeing the worry in his eyes despite his attempt to remain calm. She knew that her answers could determine not just her own future, but the future of the entire program. If the state decided that the sanctuary wasn't providing appropriate oversight or wasn't following proper procedures, they could shut it down and displace all 25 young people who called it home. I've never felt unsafe here, Maya said carefully. Everyone treats me with respect, and I've never been pressured to do anything I didn't want to do. As for making my own decisions, I have more freedom here than I've ever had anywhere else, but I also have more support when I need help figuring out what decisions to make. Ms. Mitchell made notes on her papers. Can you give me an example of the kind of support you're talking about? Maya thought for a moment. When I was trying to decide what classes to take this semester, Marcus and some of the other residents helped me think about my goals and what I would need to achieve them. But they didn't tell me what to do. They just helped me understand my options. And what are your goals, Maya? I want to finish high school and go to college to study journalism or social work. I want to have a career where I can help other kids who have been in situations like mine. And I want to keep living here until I'm ready to be completely independent. Ms. Mitchell asked several more questions about Maya's relationship with her caseworker from the foster care system, her contact with family members, and her understanding of her legal status. Maya answered as honestly as she could, while trying not to reveal how terrified she was that this interview might result in her being removed from the only stable home she had known in years. Finally, Ms. Mitchell closed her folder and put away her pen. Maya, I want you to know that based on my observations and our conversation today, it appears that you're thriving in this environment. You're attending school regularly, you're engaged in extracurricular activities, you have clear goals for your future, and you demonstrate the kind of maturity and self-awareness that suggests you're developing the skills you'll need for independent living. Maya felt some of the tension leave her body, but she knew better than to assume the conversation was over. However, Ms. Mitchell continued, there are some concerns about the sanctuary's operational procedures that need to be addressed. The state requires certain documentation and oversight protocols for residential programs serving minors, and it appears that some of those requirements haven't been consistently met. Marcus leaned forward in his chair. What specifically needs to be corrected? Ms. Mitchell opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick packet of papers. Background checks for all staff and volunteers need to be updated and filed with the state. Individual case plans need to be developed for each resident and reviewed quarterly with their assigned caseworkers. Financial records need to be maintained and audited annually. And there need to be formal policies and procedures documented for everything from discipline to emergency procedures. Maya watched Marcus's face as he looked through the packet of requirements, and she could see him calculating the time and money and bureaucratic navigation that would be needed to bring the sanctuary into full compliance with state regulations. How long do we have to implement these changes? Marcus asked. 90 days, Ms. Mitchell said. I'll be back at the end of that period for a follow-up inspection. If the requirements haven't been met, I'll have to recommend that the state suspend your license to operate as a residential facility. After Ms. Mitchell left, Maya and Marcus sat in the kitchen in silence for several minutes. Maya could see the weight of the situation settling on Marcus's shoulders, and she felt responsible even though she knew logically that her presence hadn't caused these problems. Marcus, she said finally, what does this mean? What happens if you can't meet all those requirements in 90 days? Marcus rubbed his forehead and looked at the packet of papers. It means I have to decide whether to spend the next 3 months turning this place into a traditional institutional program with all the bureaucracy and oversight that comes with that, or whether to find alternative arrangements for everyone who lives here. Maya felt the familiar panic rising in her chest, the feeling that had become automatic whenever stability was threatened. Alternative arrangements means foster care or group homes, doesn't it? For some people, yes. Others who are 18 or older could transition to independent living with some support. But, Maya, I want you to know that whatever happens, we'll make sure you have a safe place to live and continue your education. Maya nodded, but inside she was already calculating how quickly she could pack her belongings and figuring out where she might go if the sanctuary closed. The reflexive planning for disaster felt both familiar and heartbreaking after months of learning to trust that good things could be permanent. That evening, Marcus called a house meeting to explain the situation to all the residents. Maya watched the faces of her housemates as they processed the news, seeing her own fear reflected in their expressions. These were young people who had all experienced the trauma of having stability yanked away from them, and the possibility that it might happen again was devastating. But as the initial shock wore off, something remarkable happened. Instead of panicking or withdrawing into self-protection, the residents began to organize. David, who was studying business at the community college, volunteered to help Marcus navigate the financial documentation requirements. Zura, who had worked as an office assistant, offered to help create the policy and procedure manuals. Casey suggested that they reach out to former residents who are now working as social workers or in other relevant fields to get advice and support. This isn't just Marcus's problem, Casey said during the meeting. This is our home, and we're not going to let some bureaucratic requirements destroy it without putting up a fight. Maya found herself volunteering to research grant opportunities and funding sources that might help the sanctuary meet the new requirements. She had become skilled at research through her work on the school newspaper, and she wanted to contribute something concrete to saving the place that had given her a chance at a real future. Over the following weeks, the sanctuary transformed into a hub of determined activity. Residents spent their free time writing policies, organizing files, updating background checks, and reaching out to community supporters who might be able to provide resources or expertise. Maya threw herself into the grant research with the same intensity she had once applied to finding food and shelter, driven by the knowledge that losing this fight would mean losing everything she had built over the past few months. But as the 90-day deadline approached, Maya began to understand that the real test wasn't whether they could satisfy the state's requirements. The real test was whether she could handle the possibility of losing her home again and still believe that her life was worth fighting for. The scared, desperate girl who had been digging through garbage 6 months ago would have run rather than risk experiencing another loss. But the person Maya was becoming had too much to fight for to give up without trying everything possible to protect it. Whether they won or lost this battle, Maya knew she had already passed the most important test. She had learned to believe that she deserved good things, and she was willing to fight to keep them. The morning of Ms. Mitchell's return inspection, Maya woke up before her alarm and lay in bed watching the sunrise paint her room in shades of gold and pink. It had been exactly 90 days since the social worker's first visit, and every one of those days had been spent working toward this moment. The sanctuary looked different now. Not just cleaner and more organized, but somehow more official and legitimate. File cabinets lined Marcus's office, policy manuals sat on shelves in the common areas, and every resident had a formal case plan documented in triplicate. Maya got dressed carefully in the navy blue dress she had bought for special occasions, wanted to look as mature and responsible as possible when Ms. Mitchell arrived. As she brushed her hair, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and was struck by how much she had changed in the past 9 months. The desperate, frightened girl who had been digging through trash barrels was gone, replaced by someone who looked confident and purposeful. Downstairs, the kitchen was buzzing with nervous energy as residents prepared for what felt like the most important day in the sanctuary's history. Marcus was reviewing his presentation materials one more time while Casey coordinated the cleaning crew that was making sure every surface in the building was spotless. David was organizing the financial records that demonstrated the program's fiscal responsibility, and Zara was putting the finishing touches on the policy manual that had become her masterpiece. Maya, Marcus called out when he saw her. "Could you come to my office for a minute before Ms. Mitchell gets here?" Maya followed him down the hall, her stomach tight with anxiety. Over the past 3 months, she had spent countless hours in Marcus's office working on grant applications and compliance documentation, but this morning it felt different, more formal and serious. "Sit down," Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I wanted to talk to you about something before things get crazy today." Maya settled into the chair, trying to read Marcus's expression. He looked tired, but determined, the way he had looked every day since the inspection was announced. "Maya, regardless of what happens today, I want you to know how proud I am of the person you've become over the past 9 months. When I found you in that alley, I saw potential, but I had no idea just how much strength and wisdom and leadership ability you had inside you." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back. Today was not a day for crying, regardless of the outcome. "The grant proposal you wrote brought in $40,000. Marcus continued. "The newspaper articles you published about residential programs for homeless youth generated more community support than we've ever had. And the way you've helped other residents navigate their own challenges has been remarkable." "I just did what needed to be done," Maya said. "No," Marcus said firmly. "You did what a leader does. You saw a problem and you figured out how to solve it. You brought people together and helped them work toward a common goal. And you did it all while maintaining your grades and continuing to build your own future." Maya shifted uncomfortably in her chair, not entirely sure where this conversation was heading. "Maya, I've been thinking about the future of this program, and I realize that I need to start planning for succession. I'm 53 years old, and I won't be able to run the sanctuary forever. I need to start training someone to take over when I'm ready to step back." Maya's eyes widened as she began to understand what Marcus was suggesting. "I'm not talking about tomorrow or next year," Marcus said quickly. "I'm talking about a long-term plan that would involve you finishing high school, going to college to study nonprofit management or social work, and then coming back here as an associate director who could eventually take over the program." Maya stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. "You want me to run the sanctuary someday? I want you to consider it as a possibility," Marcus said. "You understand this population in a way that someone who hasn't lived this experience never could. You have natural leadership abilities and a passion for helping other young people. And you've already proven that you can handle responsibility and make good decisions under pressure." Before Maya could respond, there was a knock on the office door, and Casey stuck her head in. "Marcus, Ms. Mitchell is here," Casey said. "She's in the front entrance with another woman I don't recognize." Marcus stood up and straightened his tie. "Maya, we'll continue this conversation later. Right now, let's go show the state of Pennsylvania why the sanctuary deserves to exist." The next 4 hours were the longest of Maya's life. Ms. Mitchell and her supervisor, Dr. Jana Harper, toured every inch of the building, reviewed every document, and interviewed residents about their experiences and progress. Maya was interviewed again, this time with more specific questions about the program's effectiveness and her own development since arriving. Dr. Harper said during the interview, "Ms. Mitchell's initial report indicated that you were struggling with trust issues and social adjustment when you first arrived here. Can you tell us about your progress in those areas?" Maya thought carefully before answering. "When I first got here, I was so used to taking care of myself that I didn't know how to accept help from other people. I thought that depending on anyone for anything made me weak or vulnerable. But I've learned that being part of a community actually makes you stronger because you have people who support you and also people who depend on you to do your part. Can you give us a specific example?" "When David was struggling with his math class, I helped him study because I'm good at math. When I was having problems in my history class, Zura helped me because she loves history. We don't help each other because we're forced to or because adults tell us to. We do it because we care about each other and we want everyone to succeed." Dr. Harper made notes on her clipboard. "And what about your plans for the future? How has living here affected your goals?" "Before I came here, I didn't think I had a future," Maya said honestly. "I was just trying to survive day to day. Now I'm planning to go to college and maybe graduate school, and I want to work with young people who are going through what I went through. Living here has shown me that it's possible to take the worst experiences of your life and use them to help other people." The interviews continued through the afternoon, with each resident sharing their story and explaining how the sanctuary had affected their lives. Maya listened to her housemates talk about their progress and their goals, and she was struck by how articulate and thoughtful they all were. These weren't broken kids who needed to be managed and controlled. They were young adults who had been given the support and resources they needed to build meaningful lives. Finally, Ms. Mitchell and Dr. Harper retreated to Marcus's office to review their findings and make their decision. The residents gathered in the common room to wait, trying to distract themselves with television and conversation, but unable to focus on anything except the closed door down the hall. After what felt like hours, Marcus emerged from his office and walked slowly toward the common room. His expression was carefully neutral, and Maya felt her heart start to race. "They want to speak to everyone together," Marcus said. In the dining room, the residents filed into the dining room and took seats around the large table where they had shared so many meals and house meetings. Ms. Mitchell and Dr. Harper sat at one end of the table with their folders and clipboards, looking official and serious. Dr. Harper spoke first. "Over the past 90 days, we have conducted a comprehensive review of the sanctuary's operations, policies, and outcomes. We have interviewed staff, residents, and community partners. We have reviewed financial records, academic progress reports, and compliance documentation." Maya held her breath, afraid to hope, but unable to stop herself from hoping anyway. "We have found that the sanctuary meets or exceeds all state requirements for residential programs serving minors," Dr. Harper continued. "More importantly, we have found clear evidence that this program is achieving remarkable outcomes for young people who have not been successfully served by traditional placements." Maya felt Casey grab her hand under the table, and she squeezed back, both of them trying not to cry with relief. "Therefore," Dr. Harper said, "we are recommending that the sanctuary's license be renewed for a 5-year period, with routine annual inspections but no additional probationary requirements." The room erupted in cheers and applause, with residents hugging each other and Marcus looking like he might collapse with relief. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of joy rather than fear or sadness. Ms. Mitchell stood up and asked for quiet. "I want to say something to all of you. When I first came here 90 days ago, I was skeptical about whether a program like this could provide appropriate oversight and structure for young people with complex needs. But what I've seen here has changed my perspective on what effective residential care can look like." She looked around the table at each resident. "You've proven that young people are capable of taking responsibility for their own lives and supporting each other in ways that traditional programs often fail to achieve. You should be proud of what you've accomplished." After the officials left, the sanctuary erupted into an impromptu celebration. Someone ordered pizza, someone else found a cake in the freezer, and Casey organized a dance party in the common room. Maya participated in all of it, but part of her mind was still processing the conversation she'd had with Marcus that morning. Later that evening, as the celebration was winding down, Maya found Marcus in the kitchen cleaning up the remnants of the party. "Marcus," she said, "about what you said this morning, about me potentially running this place someday." Marcus looked up from the sink where he was washing dishes. "What about it?" "I want to do it," Maya said. "I want to try. I want to go to college and study nonprofit management and social work and learn everything I need to know to do this job well. And then I want to come back here and help other kids the way you helped me." Marcus smiled, and Maya could see tears in his eyes. "I was hoping you would say that. But I have one condition," Maya said. "What's that?" "I want to start learning now. I want to help with the administrative stuff and the fundraising and the policy development. I want to understand how this place really works, not just what it's like to live here." Marcus dried his hands on a dish towel and turned to face her fully. "Maya, I would be honored to mentor you in that process. But you need to understand that it won't be easy. Running a program like this requires dealing with difficult families, navigating bureaucracy, managing budgets, and making decisions that affect people's lives. It's not just about wanting to help people." "I know," Maya said. "But, Marcus, 9 months ago, I was digging through garbage trying to